Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to the next installment of the NTC podcast. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. I'm Aaron Washington, your host. Joining me here is Anil Gogna, and our special guest here on this installment, we're very happy to have in Coach Jim Boylen. So if you guys have been living under a rock, I think that's the only way you might not have heard of this individual here. But Jim here has a lengthy resume of coaching stops. He's very accomplished in his career. So, I mean, he's been everywhere. You know, he was assistant coach at Michigan State. He was an assistant coach with the Houston Rockets, Golden State Warriors, Milwaukee Bucks, among others. And then he also had a head coaching stop at Chicago with the Chicago Bulls for a few years. So he's been assistant at many stops in the NBA, and he was also a head coach. So he's seen his fair share of experiences. He's dealt with a lot of different players and situations, and that's why we're so happy to have him in, because he has a wealth of knowledge to bring to you guys on this podcast. So we're really excited to hear that. So, Coach, thanks so much for taking the time to join us on this podcast. We're really excited to have you. And we're excited to kind of hear your side of things as it pertains to the coaching side and also media side of the NBA. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Aaron and Anil. This is fun for me. I know we've tried to schedule this before. I'm just glad we got it in today. And I'm looking forward to spending this time with you, and let's try to help people understand maybe the league better and how to get to the league maybe, or how to kind of help their careers.
Absolutely. That's what we're here to do. That's our mission. Me and Anil have been a part of NTC, which is hard to believe, over a year now, just providing people resources like cap sheets and draft capital on our website. So we're glad to have people like you and Coach to kind of help us with that mission and help people understand what it takes to kind of get into the business and what makes it work behind the scenes, a different perspective, if you will. So let's go ahead and jump into what we're going to be talking about here today. So it's basically going to be three separate topics we want to address. First of all is going to be some of these standout call-ups that we've seen come into the NBA recently. You know, some old timers, some new guys. It's going to be a blend of those guys that I'm really excited to talk about. Secondly is going to be the opportunities for players and coaches that have been brought up through this transition time in the NBA with the shuffling of different coaches coming in, players and things like that. And then lastly, me and Anil have a few questions that we want to ask you here, Coach, pertaining to your background and some of your coaching stops here that I mentioned previously. So that's going to be the latter half of the podcast, guys. Please stay tuned to check that out. It's going to be really interesting, and we can't wait to hear that. So let's go ahead and start off, guys, with what we've seen so far with the call-ups in the NBA. I went and did some digging on how many guys have come through the NBA so far this season. This is a staggering number for you guys. Check this out. So entering Saturday, we've had 584 different players come through the NBA at one point or another, which is staggering. And that's 44 more than the previous record. So that would have been 540. But we're only in January. We're not even at the All-Star break. So that number is going to get into the 600s and above, which is really incredible. So what that made me think of is, well, who are some of the guys that have come through recently that have had really impressive stops with NBA teams? Guys that come up on hardship deals, 10-day deals. Some of those guys are going to bounce around and they may not stick. But other players, like Lance Stevenson, for a prime example, has come in and really take advantage of his opportunity, and he's going to be really impressive. So I want to turn it over to Anil. I have a few guys that I've thought of here. But Anil, is there anybody that maybe you've seen recently that you say to yourself, wow, this guy has really made a difference for the team he's playing with right now, and I can really see him sticking with that team past that hardship deal, maybe even get a rest of season deal here due to the play that he's brought to that team so far?
Yeah, I think one name that definitely stands out, getting a lot of buzz, is the returning Lance Stevenson. He put up 30 points a couple days ago, I think, against Brooklyn. He had another good game the game after. And you see a bunch of other returning vets, Isaiah Thomas, Joe Johnson, just to name a couple. Bismack Biyombo just got signed to Phoenix. I think there have been over 110-day contracts that are being given out. So I wanted to get your perspective, Coach. One, are there any players that stand out to you that you think, yeah, they could definitely make a long-lasting impression, get a longer deal here? And then two, from a coaching perspective, what changes? How do you go into a game? I think there was one story I heard in Toronto where the players hadn't met each other until they were getting ready for pregame warmups, and Nick Nurse was drawing up the plays that they were going to use for that game right there in pregame warmups. So from a coach's perspective, how do you manage all that?
Well, I think I'm just going to backtrack just a little on this. I was with the Pacers when Lance Stevenson in 11, 12, and 13. And, his talent was unbelievable. The size, the way he palms the ball, that's kind of his signature move, is to hold the ball out. But, he was so talented and he worked hard and he was a good guy. And to see him get 26 and 10 in game 6 against the Knicks in 13 and get us to the conference finals. And then this time goes by and now he gets another chance at it and he gets 20 in a quarter off the bench. I think the only guy ever, right, to get 20 points in the first quarter off the bench. It's just amazing how things can kind of be your way and then maybe you struggle a little bit or you get out of the league and then you come back in. So I love that. I love that story. We had Isaiah Thomas with a USA basketball window in Mexico, and he's gotten opportunities to be back in the league. And Joe Johnson, to see him with the Celtic uniform on, I don't know. I just thought it was cool. And I tell you what, if you can stay in shape, I wonder about the guys that maybe didn't stay in shape or could have been called up or could have got an opportunity, right? But they didn't think it was going to happen for them for whatever reason. And all of a sudden this second wave of COVID hits, right? And all of a sudden people need bodies and experience and guys to help them win. Because whether you have a game with COVID guys, non-COVID guys, G League, they all count the same, right? And they all count towards your total. Every game is important. So that whole process has been really interesting, to me, and to watch it. And, the Nick Nurse story is interesting. What he's done there, just on a side note, in the last couple of weeks is unbelievable. The games they've won and how they have played. But I think people have to understand, like, maybe how the process works. So you've got a front office, you've got your scouts, you've got your scouts that keep in touch with the G League and what's going on, or keep in touch with free agency, or who's in Europe, who's coming back, who gets cut from Europe, who gets cut from China, whatever, who's available in this moment to add to your team when you need a spot. So all the preparation that goes into that, and now you have to make a decision on bringing a guy in. Does he fit how we want to play? Is it just a body that we need to get through this 10 days? Is he somebody who could help us win long-term, like a Lance Stevenson? It looks like he might get signed for the rest of the year, and help the Pacers win. So that process starts in your scouting department. The suggestions move to your GM or your vice president, and then they've probably got to be signed off on an ownership level somehow, right? And the money's got to be allocated to go get them. And then you got to call them and try to get them in. And then you have to get them acclimated to your style of play. I mean, the equipment guy's got to be involved, right? I mean, all these layers of this process for a 10-day contract. And, you have to give credit, because there's got to be a fatigue factor for the staffs, right? Mm-hmm. Staffs in general. It's a tough job without the adjustment of new players, right? It's a tough job without bringing in a new guy every 4 or 5 days. You got a video that you've made on your system. You're going to draw some stuff up for him. There's an assistant coach spending time with him. Hopefully you get to practice with him. You might not be able to practice because you don't have enough guys, or, some guys are in quarantine. And so I just can't imagine how difficult it is, but also what an unbelievable job these teams do with this process to get guys ready to play meaningful games and help their team win. These last couple of years have been fatiguing for the league, guys. Fatiguing for front offices, fatiguing for coaches. And, people talk about the staffs in the NBA being too big and, there's 14 assistant coaches and there's this and there's that. I tell you what, this year they needed every one of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because you've had head coaches miss and you've had assistants step up, which is a great opportunity for them, a great learning moment, but also the pressure to win games and to keep the team moving along. So it's been interesting to watch, and doesn't look like we're out of the woods just yet, guys. I think it could go on here for a couple more weeks. Hopefully not. Maybe by the All-Star game, there's less cases and teams can get back to who they are, but never going to see who sticks, right? Who sticks, who gets an opportunity, who made the most of this moment. And as bad as COVID is and as frustrating as it is and as sad as it's been, with people getting sick and people dying from COVID, the opportunities come from that. And that's just amazing to me, guys.
There's
it really is, Coach.
There's something interesting that I've noticed, actually, because I'm from Toronto, so I follow the Toronto Raptors quite closely. They're currently on a 5-game winning streak, but in the last 5 games, teams are holding back players that don't want to cross the border just in case they get stuck in Canada if they test positive. So they beat Utah. Utah held out Gobert, Mitchell, Conley. They beat Milwaukee. They held out Giannis. They beat San Antonio. They held out DeJounte Murray. They beat New York. They held out Randall. They beat the Clippers. They held out Paul George. Some of those guys might have been injured, but it's definitely a coincidence, and it'll be interesting to see. Toronto's taking advantage. They won 5 straight. So maybe the COVID fortunes are swinging in their favor now.
Yeah.
They can definitely use some of that.
Yeah, I think, and just think about Utah's thought process. So, and I'm a big fan of Dennis Lindsay and what he's built there, and how they've operated the last 4 or 5 years. And Quinn's done a great job with that team. But they had a meeting probably about that, right? They met on that. So how are we going to handle our Toronto trip? What's best for our team and our players? What's best for the individual guys? How are we going to manage this? Can we go up there? Because they're in a race for home court, right? They want home court for sure. And they'd also like, they have the best record in the league again. I think they're close. So, again, that's what I'm talking about. All this work that's done behind the scenes in this moment and making all these decisions on what's best for your team, best for your guys, best for the individual, best for the coaches. I mean, it's a complex mix. It's pretty cool.
For sure. You guys bring up some great points about like how these teams are addressing COVID right now. And, we're definitely going to get into how it affects coaching staffs and players in a minute. But, with the guys that are being held out right now, like Neil, you brought up some really prominent guys like DeJounte Murray and Conley and Mitchell. I mean, those are big time players. We can't forget that there are also guys that they're not call-ups, but they were lower in the depth chart at the beginning of the season. But now they're getting a chance to flourish because some of these big-time players are going to protocols or they're hurt or whatever the case is, even rest in some cases. So, I mean, you go and look down the list, and I'm a little bit biased with this take, of course, because, Anil follows the Raptors a lot. Coach, I follow the Heat. Miami Heat are, kind of the guys I like to kind of follow and see how they're doing. They might be the prime example right now in the NBA of how you deal with this kind of situation as it pertains to next man up mentality. I look at several players that have made their mark in the NBA here for that team that were previously, third string guys like Omer Yurtseven, bringing in Max Strus coming in. And, me and Anil had the opportunity to watch those guys at Summer League, and they were very impressive. You go down the list, and it's like they beat Phoenix last night by a wide margin, even though they're missing 5 or 6 really important players on their team. So it's really cool to see how those guys are faring now. And that's a testament to not only those guys, but the coaching staff and coach, like you said, everybody down the whole list of guys in that organization. Yeah,
the development guys, keeping them ready. Max Strus. I coached Max Strus in Chicago. Loved him. The week he was at the G League showcase and got hurt in the fall of 19. And that next week we were going to bring him up with the big team and he was going to be with us. And he does a Euro step and ends up tearing his ACL. And he doesn't get that opportunity. And then he works his way back, and Chicago ends up moving on from him. He ends up in Miami, and now he's playing, helping them win, and getting quality minutes. He's a tough kid, competitive kid. He's worked. I mean, think about this, where he's come from. DePaul, now he comes in the league. He plays in the G League. He has an ACL. Some guys maybe would have hung it up or quit, and he fights through. And then he goes to Miami, which is perfect for his mindset, the culture of toughness, competitiveness, preparedness. He's right in his wheelhouse, and now he's kicking butt. And I don't know, guys, that's fun. That's fun stuff. I'm a big fan of the Miami Heat too, Aaron, and the way that they operate. Jimmy Butler, I was close with him when he was in Chicago, and loved coaching him. Tough, competitive guy. And the first thing I told Jimmy when they got Strus was, "You're going to love this guy. You're going to love Strus, man. He's your kind of guy."
You're spot on.
Yeah, you'll love playing with him. He'll compete. He can play a couple positions. I also think, guys, the teams that have versatile rosters, meaning guys that can play 2-3-4, 3-4-5, guys that can cover a couple different spots. And if they can stay healthy and be part of your team, that really helps you, because you can throw Strus out there at 2-3-4 and he'll be just fine. And most teams have a point guard and a 5, and the rest of the guys are wings. And, playing that kind of 4-round-1 system, 5-out type system, whatever it is. And they can play all different spots, and they're duplication, and the systems are simple that way when you have a point guard, a 5, and then those wings. And I think it's pretty cool. And it's also giving guys opportunity, and I can't say that enough, Aaron and Neil. That's warming to me. That's cool. You know what I mean? Guys get opportunities. It's so hard to be an NBA player. Nobody understands how good you have to be to play in this league and be part of the league and make a living in the league, and to see guys getting their chance to do that. And separate themselves, right? Separate themselves, that they got called up, and that could help them somewhere else. It'll give them an opportunity somewhere else. A lot of times one call up has led to another, maybe not with the same team, right? Well, they had him up there. Well, somebody got healthy, and he may not have been moved on from that call up because he didn't play well. It's because the spot is taken up, right?
Right.
And so, again, and that's another part of the evaluation by front offices. Who's played well? Shaq Harrison's a tough guy. He was with Brooklyn, I think, for 2 call-ups, and then they got healthy and they got some people back, and he gets moved on. He didn't play poorly. It's just, his opportunity was taken up by a roster guy. So much evaluation going on, guys,
100%. John Hollinger had a really good name for these guys in a recent Athletic article. He called them the dog day heroes, which I love that term, because these are the dog days right now. January, it could be a slog sometimes, but these guys have really stepped up. The guys that we mentioned here, it really made a difference for their teams. But I want to transition here, and Coach, you touched on this a little bit earlier, the opportunities that they've been presented to players and coaches here recently. So as of last week, actually really just a couple of days ago, there were 14 NBA head coaches that have been in protocols. So what does that mean? There have been 14 different coaching staffs that have had to kind of adjust on the fly, bring in assistant guys to be a head coach at some point or another. And I was looking on NBA.com because they had talked about Memphis head coach Taylor Jenkins missing time recently. And the Memphis assistant Brad Jones woke up yesterday morning at 7:15 a.m. to a text saying, like, hey, Coach Jenkins is in protocols. Guess what? You're the next man up. It was his time to shine. And he didn't even know until the day of. So it's really interesting to see who's had to adjust on the fly. And, Coach, I wanted to bring this question to you because you've been on NBA staffs, both as an assistant and a head coach. You've touched on some of those topics already. What would you say are some of the toughest aspects of making that transition to from assistant to head coach? Like, what are some of the things you kind of have to address or deal with as a head coach that you wouldn't have had to, or you didn't have to when you were an assistant in that role?
Well, as an assistant, you make suggestions. You have input on decisions. As a head coach, the decisions are yours.
Mm-hmm.
And the players know that. So, the final call falls on you, and you need to make sure that you're prepared to make those final calls in an educated, organized way. And the other thing is when you're subbing for your head coach, you're not going to change a whole bunch of things. You're not going to reinvent the wheel because you're the head coach now. So you have to find that middle ground between who you are as a coach in that moment as a head coach, but also support your head coach who's sitting out on the direction that you're going, right? And I think that balance is really hard. This is different than, a situation where your head coach gets fired and you move up, right? That's a different scenario. This is where you have the team for a designated amount of time. It's a finite probably amount of time, 5 days, 7 days, whatever the protocol is now. Is it 6 now or 5?
I believe 5 days.
5. Yeah. So
you got
so at the most, you probably have 3 games. You might catch a break and only have 1 game in those 5 days, but probably 2 games. And you got to keep the train moving along. But as an assistant, you have responsibilities on the bench. You might have a specific role: offense, defense, special teams, keeping track of certain stats on the bench. You might have this role. Certain players that maybe you talk to more when they come out of the game than maybe somebody else talks to, that kind of thing. As a head coach, you got to be responsible for the whole thing, right? And if an assistant coach moves down, then an assistant coach moves from behind the bench to the front of the bench, right? What's his responsibility? How's that going to be? That's another great opportunity for somebody to be on that front row. So, as a head coach, sometimes you're a CEO, you're a manager, but you just got to keep the thing going the best you can. And, without maybe changing the system or changing how you guys are playing, and just kind of foster it along, so.
Yeah, I think that's those are some great points. Chris Paul, recently there was a quote that Chris Haynes kind of put out where a fan was heckling one of the 10-day guys, Emmanuel Terry. And then Chris Paul spoke out on his behalf saying, like, we need to appreciate these guys because these guys are the reason that our season has been able to go on. So I just thought that was cool. And everything you're kind of saying reminds me of the quote that basically says, stay ready, so you have to get ready. And I think that's what this whole season kind of comes down to. But Coach, I wanted to ask you a question. Because of your extensive experience, you being a coach for over 30 years now with multiple teams at the pro level, at the college level, at the national level now, when you're watching a game compared to a regular casual fan, what are some tips of like how you watch the game differently compared to maybe just someone who's, just an average casual fan?
Yeah. Well, there's always a style of play factor. How do people play? Do they play fast? Do they play slow? Do they play small? Are they playing big? Are they playing spread? Most teams are spread now, playing 5 out since about 2012. A lot of the league has gone to this playing 5 out. And I always follow the sub pattern. It's interesting to me how some guys come out early, some guys come out late, some guys play longer stretches. I always keep an eye on that because that's a big part of the head coach's job, as we talked about earlier, but is managing the minutes, subbing, having the right guys on the floor at the right time, having the right combinations on the floor at the right time. Those are huge parts of the NBA game. So I watch that. I also, I've been just looking at players and guys that have been brought up because we have to pick our second window team for USA basketball for February 24th and 27th. So I've been watching it from a personnel standpoint too, guys, a little bit, right? Especially the call-up guys and keeping track of them. So they could be available for us. We cannot take two-way guys, but some of those guys could be back in the G League and be available for us. So I've been watching it that way too. I also think how people use their timeouts. You know, I've been a part of teams where maybe we had a young team and any 5-point run, we were calling a timeout, right? It's amazing. Some coaches wait 10, 12, 14 points before they call a timeout, especially if they have a veteran team and they want to save those timeouts. People want to have a timeout for a challenge, right? And it's great to have 3 in the last 4 minutes or last, in case you want to use one for challenge, then you got 2 under the 3-minute mark, which is good too. So, you kind of look at everything and, how a guy handles officiating. I watch a lot of post-game press conferences, to be honest with you, tough losses, big games, how guys talk to the media, what they share, what they don't share. Because the head coach's job in the NBA is to coach the team for practice and games and handle the media, right? Coach the team for practice and games and handle the media. And so those are the things I kind of look at.
Okay, those are great answers, Coach. And I'm glad you asked that question. It really kind of highlights what separates people that participate in the NBA basketball for a profession, as opposed to those who do it for fun. And Coach, it seems like the difference is when you're watching it for the interest of scouting players, you're watching coaches interact with media, you really get into the details of everything. You're not watching it from a granular standpoint. You're really getting into the details, because I don't really know many people, my friends, that watch post-game press conferences. Once the game is over, they're out, doing their next kind of next task or whatever. So I'm really glad you highlighted those very specific things, like the different ways that coaches approach the games, the different strategies they use, and then also what happens off the court is very important too. So I feel like that's a good Coach. Yeah, what you have?
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing on that point, and it's the league in general. The league is 30 teams, right? And they're all in this NBA bubble, but there's really different levels of every team in a couple different ways. Obviously, there's a financial level, right? The big markets financially, the big markets media-wise. Dealing with the media in Sacramento is different than dealing with the media in Chicago, New York, or LA, Miami, right? Houston, the bigger markets. So, we're all in the same league, but every team kind of has their own parameters and things they do differently and how they do. So a press conference in New York for Tom Thibodeau is totally different than a press conference in San Antonio for Pop. You guys know what I'm saying? And that's
Absolutely.
The interesting thing about our league is it's not everybody's the same. Not everybody operates the same. Some have one ownership group, with 10 people in it. Some have just one owner that dictates how the franchise is run. Some have a vice president of basketball, a general manager, an assistant general manager, and you have all this alignment going on, and that dictates how things work in different places. So, we talk about the league as the league, guys, but it's really 30 different entities with all different situations and constraints and positives and negatives. And, that's what I look at. That's what when I'm watching this team play or that team play, or I see this acquisition, or I see this happen, it's a lot to do with that team and that situation.
For sure. Coach, you're on this side now where you're watching the action unfold, from, behind the scenes, so to speak. But, for a long time, you were on those sidelines. You were one of those people participating in, creating game plans and talking to the scouts and talking to the GMs and other parts of the organization. So this is kind of where we want to bring it from, like an overall perspective of the NBA. We really want to get very specific and talk about you here for a second and your background and some of your different experiences. So, if you could, maybe take us back a little bit, back in time to the very beginnings of this profession for you. As Neil stated earlier, over 30 years in this profession, you've seen and done a lot. But maybe for some of those people out there that are interested in getting into coaching, or maybe want to know a little bit more about what it takes to get started in that, maybe you could tell the listeners here, how did you get started in coaching? What led you to become an NBA head coach? Was it playing? Was it watching?
Yeah.
What led you to really become invested in being a head coach for a basketball team?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's a different path, but I was a football player in high school and a basketball player. And I actually wasn't a very good basketball player. I was only like 5'10", 170 pounds when I was a junior. And I just played hard and kind of ran around, but I loved basketball. I loved the ball going through the hoop. It made you feel good. So I had a good junior year, and then I had a good junior summer, and I started getting recruited to play basketball. And I got offered a scholarship to the University of Maine in like August of my coming senior year. And I visited there, and I was still playing football, and they offered me a scholarship, and I went to Maine, and I just loved it there. I thought I could fit there. I thought I could play there. So when I played 4 years there, I got to see the East Coast and play. I was a business major, and I just thought I was going to get into business and, I don't know, make some money doing something in business and maybe even go to grad school. I don't know. I talked about my MBA, getting my MBA, but, wasn't sure if I was going to do that. So my junior year, I'm coaching at 5-star, and I played at 5-star as a kid, and then I coached there every summer in the summers as a counselor. And between my junior and senior year, I'm doing a station with John Calipari, and John was teaching a shooting station, and I was a scorer and a shooter. So he said, "Hey, pay attention to how I teach the station." I said, "All right, I'll pay attention to how you teach it." And he goes, "No, you got to really pay attention." I said, "I will, coach, I will." So he went through the first station, the first 20-minute station. At that time, 5-star was 6 20-minute stations, guys. It was a tough camp to work, hot. You're outside on the cement. And I was his demonstrator. Well, he goes to the first one. He gets done. He hands me the ball and says, "Hey, you got it, man. This is your station now. You take it over." Well, I had never really thought about coaching. And so now I'm stuck. I got these guys coming in. Excuse me. Some of them were all Americans, right? Some of them were, McDonald's guys that were at this camp. And I got to teach the shooting station 5 more times. And so I did it. And as I was doing it, I could see the reaction. I could see guys getting better, and I put them through the drills and we organized them. And I don't know, that was kind of the moment where I kind of caught the bug to coach. And that wasn't until, the summer of after my junior year. And what I also realized, guys, was, I had gone to practice my whole life from basically 2:30 to 6:30, my whole life, basketball, football, baseball, in the summers you train for those things. I always done it. And so if I wasn't going to have a place to go from 3 to 6 every day, what was I going to do? So I get asked a lot of times, like, did you get into coaching because you wanted to teach young men? Did you wanted to do, no, not really. I got into coaching out of fear of not having a place to go from 3 to 6 every day.
Mm.
That's as simple as it was for me. And so I sent out some letters to some people I knew from 5-star. I sent out letters to Marquette, Connecticut, Michigan, and Michigan State. And all 4 of them wrote me back no. And then I played in an all-star game in Michigan called the Tawassee All-Star Game, and Judd Heathcote was there. And he knew I had sent him the letter. They didn't have a GA. They didn't even have a graduate assistant to go be a graduate assistant at. Those other places did, but I was hoping they would create one. Well, Judd asked to meet me after the game, and so it's the guys from Michigan that played out of state against the guys from Michigan that played in state. Well, there was 3 guys from Michigan State on the other team in that game, so that's why Judd was there. And we had beat them that year. Maine had beat Michigan State that year, and that was the first year of the 3-point guys, the 3-point line. 87 or 86, 87 was the first year of the 3. So anyways, Judd said, "Hey, we want to talk to you after the game." I was like, really? He goes, yeah, we want to talk to you. I said, all right. So they offered me a graduate assistant's job. I went to Michigan State as a graduate assistant. I had a chance to go play over in Europe. I had one of those make good deals in Belgium. I had to get there. I had to make the team, and then they could cut me or whatever. And that was exciting to go play. But I just felt it's so hard to get these opportunities that it was time to move on with my life and kind of my coaching career. And so I went to Michigan State and was there 5 years. I had a chance to coach in the NBA Summer League between my 4th and 5th year. And I asked Judd Heathcote if I could leave for a month and go to the NBA Summer League and coach. It was at Loyola Marymount at that time. Paid my own way. I borrowed $5,000 from an old girlfriend's father. The girl didn't like me anymore, but the dad still did. So he lent me the $5,000. And I stayed in the hotel and I coached. And then I was an assistant coach for the Piston team. At that time, they had a combined teams at the Summer League. So Washington, Indiana, and Detroit put like 4 of their guys together, and they had 12 guys on the team. And I was Brendan Malone's assistant at night. And then I coached the free agent division team in the morning. So, the number one thing, and a couple things in this business are you're going to probably have to work for free or borrow some money to gain experience, right? You're going to have to pay for your basketball grad school somehow, right? And that's really important. So I had the GA at Michigan State. I got a chance to coach in this summer league, and then I met some people there. And then the following year, I was scouting and for Michigan State, and I sat next to a scout for the Rockets, and he asked me who I was and what I'd been doing, and he happened to coach my college coach in high school. And can you imagine that? And my college coach at Maine played for this guy. And so put all those things together. If I don't go to Maine, I probably don't end up in the NBA, right? Because I sit next to this guy at the Furman-Dayton game in 1985 and end up getting to the Houston Rockets and working for the Houston Rockets as their first video guy. And that's how I started. So you got to put yourself in a position to meet people and to gain experience. You're probably going to do a job that somebody doesn't want to do. For instance, John didn't want to teach that station. John's a great coach. And he gave me that opportunity to do that. He saw something in me, I guess, that I could do. And so that was somebody didn't want to do something. I got that opportunity and I ran with it. And that's going to happen in your career. And you got to be ready for those moments. And anyways, that's kind of how it started for me. Ended up with the Rockets. And then, I was able to be with a good team and move up, right? I was able to be with the Rockets for 11 years and I was able to move up, to the bench and just kind of move up and grow and learn. And then that was kind of my big run. I was with the Bulls for 6.5, 7 years. So those were my two kind of big runs in the league. And then, you bounce around a little bit, and I went back to college and for 2 years back to Michigan State. And then I was a head coach in college at Utah for 4 years. We won a championship in 2009 and had some really good players and a great experience. So, you got to grind, you got to be prepared. And, it's a little bit of a process. And I get asked a lot, how do you get in the league, guys? Aaron and Anil, what do you do to have a chance to get in the league? And, I have a kind of a process that I talk to people about that. If that's something you'd like me to share now, if we have time, I can do that. But it's really been helpful to people, and it's something that I've tried to share. I just had breakfast with a guy last week in Indy, a young guy who's coached in Europe and he wants to coach in the NBA, and he's asking me the process to get there. And as you guys know, it's very competitive and very difficult.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, guys, Coach, I'm glad you touched on your experiences there. And I mean, that's something that, me and Neil have really realized as we're coming up in this. Our path is a little bit different than yours. So get into the league here, with the advent of social media and technology, it's a little bit different, but I mean, the principles are still the same. You still have to grind. You still have to seek those opportunities. You still have to prepare yourself. Just stay ready so you don't have to get ready, like Anil said, and preparation meets opportunity. That's what comes down to the end of the day. But I think Anil had a question for you pertaining to your Rockets experience. Sure. Anil, I'll let you take it away on that one.
Yeah, Coach. So obviously you've had multiple stops all over the NBA and college. You've had good seasons. You've had tough seasons. You've won 3 NBA titles, 2 of which were with the Houston Rockets. And that was your first stop in the NBA. So I'm assuming after the first 2 years, you must have thought, this isn't that difficult. Like I've been in the NBA 2 seasons. I've won 2 titles. All right, let's keep this going. Obviously, it was another 20 plus years before you won another one with the Spurs. But I just wanted to ask you about what it was like to be part of those 2 championship Houston Rockets teams back in the 90s. And a question that's debated a lot, especially with Kenny Smith being on Inside the NBA, is how do you think it would have gone if MJ didn't retire and those Rockets teams met those Bulls teams in the finals?
Yeah, well, I got to remember your questions here. To be with the Rockets, and at that time in the league, guys, there wasn't the big staffs there is now. So you did everything. I used to get on a plane and fly from Houston to San Antonio, scout the game, fly back on the 11 o'clock on Southwest, and do the walkthrough the next day, or help with the walkthrough the next day. So you didn't have a scout out doing this and this guy doing that and all these divisions of your staff departments. You kind of did everything. And then, Scotty Brooks would call me at, 9 o'clock at night. Hey, get over to the Compaq Center. You got to rebound for me. Okay. So drive over there, rebound for him. A lot of times I was in my office because I was a video guy too, and so, Rudy T was great he wanted me to experience everything. I would go see a college game if I had time. I would, work out guys, I'd be at practice, sometimes have to demonstrate stuff in practice, be the blocking dummy in practice, and that was really fun for me. And you got to learn every asset or every facet of, kind of how the team runs and what teams do. We were involved in trade discussions. I did the video for that. I did all the video for the Clyde Drexler trade, and it was a great learning, moment for me, and after winning the championship, and then we make a big trade, and to be involved in that and the thought process and how it went and how Rudy thought and that whole thing. So all those experiences you learn, the Sean Elliott trade, right? When we had to send him back. You guys remember that? You guys are a little younger than me, but we had to send Bullard. Those guys came back, right? And so just all those experiences, man, you just learn and you grow and you kind of refine what you believe in. But you also have an open mind to always learn, because this league is changing so fast, guys. It's changing exponential every year. It changes style of play, the players you need to win, how you evaluate winning players, the analytics of the game. Do you understand them? Can you comprehend them? Can you communicate with them? The players didn't used to have the analytics when I first got in the league. Just kind of the coaches and the front offices had them. Now everything's on the internet, right? Players have the analytics too. And so that creates where you really got to communicate where you're going and what's important, because everybody has all the information. So to see the league evolve the way it has and change, and that all started in Houston. And Rudy was great at being a mentor for me, teaching me. Carol Dawson was a big-time NBA assistant at that time and our general manager. I used to sit in his living room and we'd watch film together in the summer, and he would explain to me what things were and how to break it down and what's important. And we would sit in his and I used to wear a winter coat in his living room because it has air conditioning at like 48 degrees. And
man,
but
I'd be in bad shape.
Those are the things, I remember the championships. We had great players. We had the toughest guy to me in the world at that time, in Hakeem Olajuwon. Remember, guys, the league was totally different, man. You could hit people, and it was a totally different game. The pace wasn't the same. So I don't want to understate that or overstate that. The pace now is fatiguing on guys. There's 20 more possessions per game now than there was then. So if you add that up, that's 1,600 more possessions, right, than there used to be. So the speed of the game and the way it's played now is different. Back then, though, it was a more physical game, half-court game, post-up game. And we had Hakeem Olajuwon, and, you know, I think he was the best player in the world for those couple years, in my opinion. And then the Chicago Bulls rivalry, you know, we had some success against them in the regular season. And when I was in Chicago as an assistant, I met with Phil Jackson at his house, and we had some of these conversations just about that rivalry and that game, that matchup that never happened, right? We had great respect for them and their system, and I think they had great respect for us and who we were. We had tough guys. They had, obviously, Jordan, you know, the greatest player of all time, the winningest player too, to me, you know, of all time. And so, you know, it would have been a series like no other, in my opinion. But we had some success against them in the regular season. And who knows if that would have translated or not. But we had Ellie and Vernon Maxwell and Sam Cassell and Dream. And, you know, we had Robert Horry, who to me is like the most underrated winning player of all time. And, you know, he was kind of one of the first spread fours, right? We moved him to the 4. We drafted him as a 3, moved him to the 4. That was Rudy who developed him that way. And so, you know, we can debate that all day, Anil. It never happened. And, you know, I think Houston's thankful for their championships. And I know being in Chicago, they're thankful for their 2 runs. To win it 3 times in a row, like they did, you know, twice to back. After going through a back-to-back, you know, and then being with the Spurs when we won it in 14 and we were trying to win it again in 15, to win 3 championships in a row, guys, it's so difficult. The fatigue factor, the personalities, injury, you got to get a few breaks, you know, and it's just amazing what Phil Jackson and those guys did to win 3 in a row like that. I think that's the hardest thing to do, is go back to back, and then to do it again. It's mind-boggling. So I think to compare those teams to each other is unfair. Would it have been a great series? Of course. And, you know, I'm a big fan of Dreams and that team. And I'm also a big fan of the Bulls teams too.
Those are great stories, Coach. I mean, that's one of our favorite parts about having these conversations, is those specific situations that you can kind of give us and, you know, really shed some light on these players and these coaches and things like that. So, you know, we're already done this podcast, but I mean, we just have a couple other questions for you, Coach, you know, to kind of bring us home. You know, you've been around a lot of different players and, you know, had a lot of different experiences. So, I mean, you talked about Hakeem Olajuwon, you talked about Paul George a little bit, Jimmy Butler, and, you know, all these other guys. I mean, I don't know if you want to answer this question. Like, this may not be, you know, a tough question to answer, but I mean, do you have, you know, an opinion as to maybe the best player you coached, the most talented player? I mean, I know there's a lot of choices out there. It's hard to narrow one down.
Yeah.
If maybe you're not comfortable with that, maybe your favorite player to coach. I mean, you know, could you shed some light on, you know, some of those guys you just love coach?
You know, guys, you know, as an assistant on those championship teams, you know, you're kind of just a humble servant. You know, your job is to support the players and the head coach and the franchise. And I'm just so grateful and thankful and appreciative and blessed to have that opportunity to be part of those teams. I was a little piece of those teams, but I did support my head coach and I supported the franchise and the players the best of my ability. And to say who is this or who is that, I will say this, you know, I do think, you know, the toughest guy, you can only talk about who you've coached, right? You can't, I didn't coach Jordan. I didn't coach Karl Malone. I didn't coach John Stockton, so I was around Akeem, and to me, he's like the toughest guy I've ever seen, he just, and the athleticism at that size, guys, is just, it's
incredible.
It was incredible. Yeah. So he's that, right? And then, Tim Duncan, I was part of that staff in his later years, but, he was the kindest, most intelligent, person and just a great player, and how he grew his game even as he aged, and how he just helped them win every year, even though maybe he didn't have the same role. It just, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like that, to be a part of that. And that whole team, Ginobili, Parker, Diaw, were great guys. Barkley was the most fun to be around. Sam Cassell was a really good player. Robert Horry was a good friend and a good player, a winning player, the best passer, post passer, out of bounds passer, in my opinion, in the history of the game. He could make the 4-to-5 big to big pass as good as anybody. And he was really, really smart, and a good person and a winning guy. What's he got? 7 rings, guys? Or
Yeah, 7 rings.
7, come on, man. And I remember when we drafted him, we didn't take Harold Miner, right? And they booed us off the stage. We were doing it in the Compaq Center, and we were supposed to take Harold Miner. He was Baby Jordan, if you guys remember that. Again, you guys are a little younger, but we took Robert Horry, and they booed Rudy off the stage. The fans.
Oh, boy.
And then Robert, you never heard of Baby Jordan again. And Robert Horry had the most unbelievable career you could have. And anybody that wanted to win picked him up. The Spurs, the Lakers, right? Because he could play with a dominant center. And people don't talk about that enough. He had a knack to play with the dominant center. That's a skill, at that time in the league. That was a big time skill. So, and then you mentioned Kawhi and Paul George and those guys. So I think one thing that's interesting, I put Jimmy Butler in there too. So you got Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler. Okay. Jimmy Butler was drafted maybe the latest. What was he, 30?
I think it was 30, yeah.
30, okay. And those other 2 guys, I think, were in the lottery or close to the lottery, right? So, but all 3 of those guys, they didn't start when they first came in the league. They became defenders and rebounders and stoppers first. I wouldn't call them role players, but, they came off the bench, and then they grew. They established themselves to be able to get on the floor by playing defense and playing the right way. And then offensively, they grew, and they became who they are now, who young kids today think that's who they've been the whole time. Guys, they haven't.
Not the case.
So the lesson in that is, whatever level you get in the league, and Rudy T used to say this, whatever a guy comes in at, he still has to get better to reach his potential and be the best version of himself. Even Tim Duncan, guys, as great as he was, he got better and to become the best version of himself. And that's what you're hoping for as a franchise and a coach. And, Ja Morant, he comes in, he's dynamic and everything. He's getting better, guys. He's growing, he's figuring out, maybe he got hurt a little bit, maybe sitting out and watching what's going on and seeing, it helped him, right? He got to see maybe some things and take a break for a minute and figure it out. So, you have to get better. You have to grow. And it comes down to your character and your work ethic. Paul George worked, man. He worked. Kawhi Leonard worked. He was coachable, teachable. He was respectful. Jimmy Butler was tough as nails, man. He still is,
Still is.
And he worked and he cared and he wasn't afraid to speak up to a teammate when that guy was out of line or didn't work hard enough, and when you got a player coach team, that's why I think Miami's got a great shot to win it all, because they got a player coach team. They got players that take ownership of how the team performs. We had that in San Antonio. Tim Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, they took ownership of how the team performed. And That's really important, guys. And I'm hoping Kawhi gets back. I'm sure he will. And Paul George hopefully will be back soon, a couple weeks, right, for him with the elbow. Mm-hmm. And, Jimmy Butler is just a machine, I mean, and, Jimmy Butler, he's tough too, man. He plays through injuries and, he gets beat on every night and just keeps playing and playing and playing. And, what a smart pickup for Miami, the guy that fits perfectly into their culture. I mean, think about 100%. their three guys. So they got Lowry, Bam, and Jimmy Butler. They're the same player at different positions. They can create.
That's a good way to put it.
They can create. They can receive, right? They can make decisions. They can defend. They have physicality. They embrace contact. They have leadership ability. Think about that. They have three guys that are exactly the same at three different spots. I mean, the way that they've built that team, Andy and Pat and those guys down there, I mean, it's unbelievable.
World-class organization for sure.
Yeah, to me, it's unbelievable. And they're going to be tough to beat. They're going to be tough to move out of those playoffs, man. I don't care where they finish. And they've been there before too. So finishing, we finished 6th in 95 and won it. When you've been to the mountaintop and you've seen what the view looks like, it's not as important where you finish, it's that you get in and you're healthy at the appropriate time, right? And that's in 14, we were the healthiest team. We were the healthiest we had been all year during that run. And that's a big, big deal. For Golden State, that'll be a big deal this year, right? Can they be healthy at the appropriate time because they're good enough to win it? So see how that goes. But hopefully I haven't talked too much, guys. I appreciate this time together.
No, absolutely. And Coach, we're coming up here towards the hour, so we'll definitely get you out of here soon. We just have one last question, but thank you so much for all the time that you've spent with us. It's been awesome. So last question, of all the stops you've had, which have been numerous, what would you say was your favorite year?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Well, you learn so much. I think, my first year as a video guy was just a real challenging, tough year making that transition from college to pro, the length of the season. And, I don't know if it was my favorite year, but I think I just learned so much and worked so hard and just loved every minute of it. I remember that year as a really good year and in my growth as a person and a player. I mean, as a person and a coach. In 14, when we won the championships, I wasn't married and I didn't have kids. And in 14, to win that championship as a part of the Spurs and have my kids on the floor for the celebration and my wife, that was big time. That moment, to share that moment, think about that. It's hard, right? It's hard to win a championship, let alone, your family being there and the timing of it. And so I have a picture of my girls with the trophy and us on the floor. And, so that was cool. Had a real good team in Utah in 2009, a great group of guys. Luke Neville, Sean Green. I had Johnny Bryant the year before, who's assistant for New York. And, Lawrence Bora and Luka Durcha, Tyler Kepke, just that team in 2009, we won the Mountain West, and that was a great year in coaching. And those guys were just terrific guys and hard workers and tough. We were really good defensively. So coaching the Bulls as a head coach was unbelievable experience. The way the Reinsdorfs treated me, how John Paxson and Gar Forman treated me was outstanding, and I learned a ton. And so thankful for that opportunity and the ability to provide for my family. So, guys have been blessed. I've had a lot of good things happen. I'm looking forward to the next thing, whatever that is. And I'm really thankful for this USA Basketball opportunity. Sean Ford and Jim Tooley and USA Basketball is just an unbelievable organization, class and professional. And I've learned a ton about playing, FIBA style basketball, which is totally different. And I feel like I'm growing again, which, as you guys know, is really fun. So I appreciate our time together. You guys have been great. Thanks for all the help and support into this. And Happy New Year. And hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Hey, Happy New Year to you, Coach. Thanks so much again for the opportunity. Anil, thank you for your great questions provided, Coach, today. Here, No Trade Clause, that's what we're here to do. Inform the masses, provide a little bit of entertainment, all the good stuff. So we have a website, notradeclause.com. That's where you can find our resources. Anil handles our cap sheets. I do some draft capital. We have some other members of the team that want to bring you a bunch of resources on the business side of the NBA. So be sure to check that out. We have a resource over at No Trade Clause, and then also No Trade _clause. So that's our Instagram and Twitter handles. So you guys can get involved with us on there. We have some information like when guys get signed or waived or traded. We have some updates to provide for you on there. So be sure to check that out as well. And then sportsbusinessclassroom.com. I mean, that's how me and Anil got involved with this. Coach Boylen here was a part of that just a couple weeks ago. So be sure to check that out. There's a great resource for you guys if you're looking to get into the NBA. So that's going to bring us to the end of our broadcast here today. We had really a lot of fun here talking to you guys. We hope to see you on the next installment of NTC. So we'll be back real soon. We hope you guys have a great rest of your day. We'll see you soon and take care.